Hello and welcome back to 1874. It's time for another show as myself, Dan Bardell, and the Athletics Aston Villa correspondent Jacob Tanswell get together to look at 5 reasons to feel positive ahead of Aston Villa's 25-26 seasons. It was actually Jacob's idea to do this show. He felt like we were coming across a little bit negative, talking about players being sold and PSR all the time. So obviously under Emery, there's always loads to be positive about being a Villa fan. So today we wanted to focus on some positives and get that in order and talk about the 5 things that we think are the reasons to be cheerful ahead of next season. This show is sponsored by Match Bingo. If you head to 1874.io/Match Bingo, you'll be able to buy your bingo cards ahead of the Champions League final on Saturday, which I've got to admit, I'm really, really looking forward to. PSG against Inter Milan, a really, really intriguing game. So head out to Match Bingo and get yourself some cards. It's a fun way to enjoy football and potentially win yourself some money as well. Jacob, how are we?
Doing very well, thank you. It's been a busy week. Normally you expect there to be a little lull, and I'm sure from Villa's perspective there is a bit of a lull before the chaos starts. But right now I'm just cracking on a few pieces, and it's been a good week really. You get to have a full week between games and stuff, so you can really prepare your week in terms of what content you want to write. And it's been a busy one with season ticket prices, everything like that going out. So it's been a good week, but I do feel it's been quite a downcast, downtrodden week. So I think doing something positive and realising how well Villa are doing from the football side of things is always good to do.
We're going to ban the term PSR for this show. So as soon as we get into it, no one is allowed to say that word, because you're right. We've been a bit heavy on it. Obviously, we have to talk about it. It's a really prevalent subject in the Villa sphere at the moment. But for this show, we're going to do our best. In fact, we're not going to do our best. We are not going to talk about PSR once. So forget about PSR, Jacob. Get the phrase PSR out of your mind. We're going to focus on some positives ahead of this show. Right then, the first one, and this is the kind of my biggest positive, when the dust settles on the fact that Villa haven't qualified for the Champions League, which I've got to admit still is a little bit disappointing, because obviously it was on goal difference and it was so tight, and we lost to a really pitiful Manchester United side on the last day of the season. But now the dust is starting to settle. We start to focus on Villa being in the Europa League next season. You've got to look at that as a huge positive. We've both spoken about how it's 2 avenues for the 26-27 season towards getting into the Champions League. So for the 26-27 season, Villa could potentially be in the Champions League because they've won the Europa League, and that would also get the monkey off the back with the trophy. But the biggest thing around the Europa League, I suppose, Jacob, is actually Unai Emery. He is an expert in this tournament. Won it 3 times, I think it is, whilst managing Spanish teams. 4, is it? Oh, he's even better than I thought. So it's even more of a positive. The fact that Villa have got this Europa League expert in charge at the helm for them. But I spoke last season about how he was the ideal manager for Villa to navigate a Champions League campaign because of the way he works and the kind of club that we are. Same really applies for the Europa League, doesn't it?
It does. I think, obviously, like you say, Emery is a master of this. Four-time winner, shows that he knows how to navigate. But at his previous clubs, Sevilla, Villarreal, where he won it, there had been a dip in the league. The fact that Villa, especially last year, finished 4th and got to Conference League semi-final shows that they can still maintain good club league form whilst competing and going deep into Europe. But as you saw in that semi-final against Olympiacos, those that just naturally assume that Villa are going to turn up and should be favourites. You just don't know what the position's going to be next February, next March, when you come into the crunch knockout games. Villa are 12th. God forbid. Emery might say, like United and Tottenham did, let's put all our eggs in Europa League basket and let's win this competition to get into the Champions League. Let's say Villa are 3rd or 4th, then his attention's naturally going to be divided. So, you can never really predict how a team's going to go. They might have injuries, whatever, mitigating circumstances. But Emery's the best qualified manager to win the Europa League. He knows the competition very well. And the fact that Villa have completed the set under him in terms of all the European competitions shows that they've now got a lot of experience in playing under different atmospheres, different countries, different styles of play, and they should, nothing should be stepping into the unknown in this competition, if that makes sense.
I prefer to complete the set in Chelsea's way, where they've won it all. That would be my preference in set completing, but we've got a long way to go to do that. But I think you're right. I think it's it's almost a bonus to have done the Conference League and done the Champions League ahead of a Europa League campaign. And I also think that, seeing Tottenham win it, obviously they did write off their season in the end and ended up finishing where they did in the league, which was really, really low. I don't envisage that being the scenario for Villa at all. But I think one thing he's done is he's shown that the strength of the Premier League, and, if Tottenham and Manchester United can get to the final, you'd think a really, really good upwardly mobile Villa side has got a massive chance, despite the fact that there's other teams in there. The fact as well that teams don't drop down anymore, that's a real benefit to Villa. I think Emery's won it when teams have dropped down from the Champions League, which is an even bigger coup for him. So I just think it's all set up for Villa to have a really good crack at the Europa League. And as a fan now, I think, I hate doing this because we always do this kind of thing. We always get asked this kind of thing as well. Would you rather? But would I rather Villa finish in the top 4 or 5 in the league and get into the Champions League, or would I rather they win the Europa League and get in the Champions League? I'd rather the Europa League, because it kills two birds with one stone, doesn't it? And that's a massive opportunity and a massive thing for next season, Jacob.
Yeah, and I'm not being funny. I'm not going to go out and go on an open top bus tour if Villa finish third. If they win the Europa League and they finish 12th, then yeah, I would. I think I keep saying this, and I know people disagree, and that's fair, but you're in football to win trophies. And there's no other point. If you want to celebrate record-breaking revenues, then great. That's your basket. I've always loved football, like I'm sure like you do. It's because you want to win trophies, and that's the key. So if Villa can do that through, not let's say they're not going to have such a disastrous season as Spurs or United would.
Let's hope not.
But even if I would, more than happy. I'm not a Villa fan, so I can't speak for you guys, but I think I'd be more than happy with a drop off in the league. It won't be that much, 8th, 9th maybe, but winning Europa League, I think that's the best thing. And to win a massive trophy like that for Villa under Emery is what you want, and that's why people have been craving it, and why every single cup exit seems pretty disastrous.
Yeah, you touched on it earlier on in the show about Villa managed to get to a semi-final of Europa Conference League and finish 4th in the league. Also getting to the quarterfinals in the Champions League and finishing 5th.
Yeah.
In the Europa League, I've said it's probably obviously a balance between those two competitions. It's middle ground in terms of those 3 European competitions. But it won't be like the Champions League where Villa kind of have to play their best 11 every single game in the group. There will be more rotation. Players will get more football, but it shouldn't affect the Premier League fund, because we expect Villa to have a really strong squad, whatever happens in the summer. But there'll be more kind of opportunity to rest and rotate than there was managing Champions League and Premier League and FA Cup at the same time.
Yeah, definitely. I think we saw the group stages this year, and the fact that there's 8 games, which means you do have more room for error, don't you? So especially early on, you can rest and rotate, or give players that haven't started yet in the season some game time. But again, Emery's always quite cautious with making wholesale changes in Europe. I think the Legia Warsaw defeat last year really burned him when Callum Chambers played, except those guys played. And I think from then on in, he tried to not have as much changes, but you've seen towards the end of this season that he's happy, and he's not against making big changes because of the squad depth. So when they played Forest 8 changes, you could probably see that it's quite feasible to see that in Europe this time, because you've got really good squad, you've got really good depth, and Villa will still have that even after what happens in June. But the only difference is that, unlike this season, Villa are going to be playing on a Thursday, right? So they're going to have probably 1 day less, maybe, to prepare a lot of the time. They're going to be coming back late in the early hours of Friday morning to prepare for the game on the weekend. So they're going to have to factor that in. But like I said, these players, this club, the culture, the way they want to talk about things is that they want more games all the time. So they're not going to complain or make excuses about that.
If I remember correctly, I feel like Villa managed the Thursday, Sunday better than they did the Tuesday, Wednesday, Saturday, like last season as well. So I guess that's a positive.
Yeah, they did. And maybe one of the reasons as well is because the Champions League gave such highs. You're playing Bayern Munich, you're playing Juventus at home. This is the first time that a lot of these players are playing in the competition, so they're fully focused on that. And then it must have been quite emotionally difficult to raise your levels for the next game, whoever that may be against. That's just natural. It's maybe a subconscious thing. But Villa tended to manage, like you say, the Conference League well. And if they didn't, they would have finished in 4th. So, like I say, these Villa players are not going to be overruled by being in the Europa League. They're used to it now, which is the great thing, and they know that they want to be a top 4, top 6 club every single season. And the fact they are for the last 2 years shows that they're not going to be overruled by being in the Europa League. They've done it before, really.
I guess as well, top 8 in the Champions League. Villa navigated that new format really, really well and proved that they can finish in the top 8 in the elite, the Premier European competition. So again, you'd imagine the Europa League, Villa know how to manage that. They've got a really good chance of finishing that top 8, avoiding the playoffs, maybe kind of getting in there early and being able to rotate a little bit more. These are all really positive things, and the journey we've been on with Emery and the journey these players have been on with Emery in the Conference League and the Champions League, I can't help but think it does stand us in perfect stead for a campaign with the Europa League.
Yeah, and the fact is you're going to have 4 games, aren't you, at home, and Villa are full Middlesbrough home that we'll come on to. So that can be the bedding for the league phase almost. I think Villa will obviously try and be and finish as high as they can to avoid those games. But even still, I don't think Villa will mind too much playing more games, because that's, especially early in the season, that's how they like to play. And it will lead on to the next point. But if they can keep a squad large enough with fewer injuries, and then, like you say, rotate and maybe incorporate a couple of the young players as well, more games won't really harm them.
I mean, Jacob's done really well in that answer to give away 3 of the 5 points. We've already done one as well. So now 4 of the points are pretty much known, because Jacob's managed to give them away in his answering questions about the first point that we were trying to make. Trying to look at where's next for us to go out of the 5.
It's a good segue. It's a good segue, Dan.
It would have been if you hadn't done 3 segues. That would it would have been a great segue. Let's go with yours. This was yours, number 2. You came up with this one: injury prevention / knowing when to peak. Do you want to just talk a little bit about what you meant by that? Because I've got to admit, I had to ask what you meant by that and why that was a positive.
Yeah, so I wrote in my end of season piece that Villa were happy with how they peaked at the end. If you obviously compare it to the Liam Parker's game, where they had a little left in the tank, they thought they had a lot of energy left. They thought they were physically good towards the end of this season, and I think they took on the learnings of the first year of how they kind of peaked in the early months, really, and then were left running off fumes. But having that evidence, having that case study almost, is what they'll do this season. So they'll know how to peak at the right times, and peaking for a hard competition in Europe and the defining set of Premier League fixtures as well. So they have that in the bank. They've learned from that. So I don't think they'll make the same mistake they did in the Conference League, for example. And yes, what was the injury prevention? People think
your idea. This,
yeah, people forget that we always talk about Tottenham's injuries. Villa's injuries have been poor for 2 seasons now. They've not been great at that in terms of getting players back and keeping them back. So there's been a lot of recurring injuries, muscle injuries, hamstring injuries, these injuries that go on for longer, and it kind of just disrupts the rhythm and leaves Villa short at times in different areas. There's a couple of things I'd say. Villa are going to try to sign players that are versatile, they can play in different positions. So I don't envisage them to have a centre-back crisis like they did this season. And secondly, I think towards the end of the season, they got the workload and the injury issues probably just under control, or as much control as they have in the last 2 seasons before that. So the hope is that these players, a lot of them will have fully a big break, because they're not going away with their countries for these major tournaments, that they can then hit the ground running in pre-season and do all their physical work and injury prevention work in pre-season to then improve and make sure that they can last the course of the campaign.
What do you just mentioned that kind of the back end of the season, that was probably Villa's best period in terms of injuries and not having them. I know we lost Rashford towards the end of the season, but generally we had nowhere near the volume of injuries that we've had for the last year and a half under Emery. Do you think one of the reasons for that was because they finally got the squad size and the squad depth right, and included in that, you've got a lot of multifunctional players that can cover different roles, so the squad is not massive. But do you think they finally got the balance right in terms of squad size, and they'll take that into this season, knowing that whatever happens, this is the number of players we need, this is the amount of positions that need covering?
Yeah, they've got an ideal squad size in that mind. Of course, that's going to change with no Champions League football, so they can't just pack it out with real high level players. They're going to probably have to substitute it with a few on lesser wages, but can equally fill the role. But in terms of learning, it's because Villa realised that they had to build into the season, so they couldn't go off, really quick out of the block straight away. They had to build in, so they would give players more rest days early in the season. They give some players individually rest days. The tempo of training would change, etc. The intensity of training as well. So they have that now. They know how to structure almost like a training program, really, to make sure that they peak at the right time. And therefore, you should see the fruits of that labour towards the end of the season with fewer injuries. Of course, some injuries can't be helped, but the controllables, I think they've been able to do better towards the end of this season rather than last.
You might not know the answer to this question, but it's just come to me whilst we're recording this. In terms of the medical staff and kind of the evolution of it under Emery, have there been many changes over the last few years to how Villa do things, or the personnel within the medical staff? Do you know?
I don't know fully. In terms of personnel, Emery's got some of his guys in, some more of the Spanish contingent. Obviously, naturally, whenever a new manager comes in or a new regime, they're going to change backroom staff. And the longer you're there, you're probably going to change it more. People also go to just different jobs as well. It's very fluid, the medical profession, I guess. So yeah, a few of Emery's guys have come in the last couple of years, and a few have moved out as well. But in terms of what they do from a physiotherapy point of view compared to the previous regime, I'm not too sure.
Okay. Point number 3 then, Jacob, is youth. The youth academy. Obviously, they've had a very successful season in the under-21s and the under-18s, and this is something I know that you're, one, quite enthused about, and two, quite passionate about as well, being a former academy player yourself. Villa are in a healthy position with academy players. Do we think now, with the Europa League probably factored into this as well, this is the season where we see some players make the step up and make the breakthrough for Villa?
I really hope so. I think they've got some really good young talent, and they may not break through this season, but I hope they can bridge the gap. I think the under-18, for example, are a really good team, and by all accounts from what I hear, a couple of the years below, I've seen that's been even better for their age than the 18s were at that point. I know the 18s have been bolstered enormously by recruitment and good recruitment in recent years, and if you can get some of those guys like your Hemmings, Ball, and Jamaldine, maybe a couple of them will head out on loan, Tristan Rowe, in and around that first team squad, training on a daily basis, and maybe playing in the Europa League, maybe playing in the cup games, maybe starting a few cup games. If you give them that chance and they do very, very well, then who knows? It might be like a Lewis Skelly type of thing. You give them a chance, there might be an injury, an opportunity opens up, and they take that shirt and they make it their own. So that's something I'm really excited to see. I think a lot of these players have scope to do that. I think they're some really, really good young players, and players that I don't think will look out of place in that first team. The question is, Emery needs to trust them. That's the key for Emery. If he can trust them to do a job, to fit within his structure, to be disciplined, he'll give them a go. So they need to prove that, and I think pre-season will be a key time for that.
Yes, it's really difficult, isn't it? That trust and building that momentum, especially if a player hasn't had a loan, and even then, I think even when a player has had a loan, it's pretty tough. If you look at the teams that are towards the upper echelon of the Premier League and where Villa are in the Premier League, you've referenced Lewis Skelly, Nwaneri, probably as well at Arsenal. They've come through this year, but generally the clubs that are around Villa as well, not loads have come through. It's the hardest jump to make when you're at a club that's operating towards the top. It's really, really hard to break in. I look at Newcastle, Lewis Miley, to an extent, has broken in. I think Elliot Anderson would have played a big role for them last season, but they sold him due to PSR. Man City, I suppose, the left back, Nico O'Reilly, he came in towards the end of the season. McAtee's still relatively young, but I think he's more one for circumstance more than anything, because Man City have struggled, and he's been given a chance and managed to get ahead of a few other players, including Jack Grealish, probably there. Liverpool, yes, Trent's homegrown, but didn't have any real youth come through last season. Who am I missing here?
Connor Bradley.
I'd say he came through last season. Chelsea, Tyreek George came in towards the end of the season. It's hard, isn't it?
Yeah, but that Tyreek George, I was going to bring him up, is probably the example. So he's not, you wouldn't say he's fully broken through, but he started to come around it. He's made 8 or 9 Premier League appearances now. He's playing in the Cups. He's played in the Conference League. He's starting to show that he can be of value to Chelsea's first team. That's what I think Villa an under 18 or a player around that age needs to show really that they're not just going to be training with the first team on a Friday because they need to help out in an 11v11 shape work. They can actually be part of the squad and they can be trusted to come on in games. Like Jamaldine potentially could be. Like these young players that can be as well. And slowly over the season or the season after that, show that they can be ready to go at some point. And once they get that chance to start games, then that'll be fantastic. So it's obviously difficult. It's a balancing act, isn't it? About you want to keep these players and you want to homegrown players, but at the same time they're very valuable on the PSR books. Last time I talked about PSR, but
Yellow card for you, Jacob.
you mentioned PSR just before me.
I never said the words, did I?
You did mention
I
it as
did
well.
not.
You did with Elliot Anderson.
I think Elliot Anderson would have played a big role for them last season, but they sold him due to PSR. Oh, I did. Both yellow cards. Yellow card for both of us. I did.
But I do think, hopefully, and they've got the talent now, and Villa's academy in terms of coaching and in terms of recruitment is doing wonderful work. That one of them can come through soon.
Yeah, we've got to be careful. I don't want to be sending either of us off because it'll be quite a lonely show if one of us is talking about this stuff on our own. I'm just going to ask on the academy. 2 questions I've got for you here. One, do you think Kellyman would have been that player had he stayed this season just gone? 2, pick one name for next season that you think could be the player to break the mould.
In terms of Kellyman, I think he would have played. I think he would have featured more. I don't know if he would have broken through, but I certainly think he would have started a couple of games, and I think he would have been a good option off the bench as well. And that's a shame. But with his injuries this season, he's had terrible luck.
Yeah.
You don't know how available he would be. I think it's so difficult to say who would play. I love George Hemmings and Aidan Borland, but they're centre midfielders, and they are very well stopped in there. So it's just a matter of circumstance, right? Let's say Matty Cash is injured, Andres Garcia is injured, and maybe another right back's not playing. Tristan Rowe could all of a sudden get a chance. These players as well. I think Jamaldine looks like the closest at the moment, but maybe a loan for his progression. Cole Brannigan as well. You've got some really good players. I think the centre backs are still quite green and young, so I don't think they'll come in yet. But let's just say if there's one player that I think could come through, I'd probably say George Hemmings.
Okay, we'll keep an eye on that. And we'll track that through next season, Jacob, and see if you're correct. Right, let's move on to reason number 4. And reason number 4, Jacob, is Fortress Villa Park. Incredible home record for Villa. Overall, really, since Emery's been there, but especially last season, only losing the first home league game of the season and losing early doors in the Carabao Cup to Crystal Palace. Other than that, unbeaten. Teams come to Villa Park now knowing how difficult it is to play there, knowing how difficult it is, even if you play well, to come away with a result now. So that's a real positive because that's really something that's been a theme through Emery's whole reign. And I've got some numbers when you finish talking.
Yeah, they've got the biggest deficit, haven't they, or the biggest difference between home and away points of any team.
I did not know that. That's a good
in
stat
the league.
as well.
Yeah, and it shows one that there's room for improvement in the away form, but secondly how brilliant they've been at home. And like you say, one loss in the league this season, and one of their best performances actually. If Watkins scored, could finish his chances in that game, Villa could easily have won that game. But even the season before, right, they broke records in terms of successive wins. It has been the foundation of the team. And even when Villa were kind of toiling at the start of this season, and these games where they weren't very good, they just kept getting the job done, didn't they? Or kept avoiding losing. And that's what gives Villa and Emery the backbone, really. I just like to see them be a little bit more confident in how they start games at Villa sometimes away from home. And if they can get that balance right, then I think that could be the difference between making the Champions League and not.
Okay, so if we've got some numbers here, courtesy of ABFC Stato spreadsheet. He screenshotted his spreadsheet and sent me some numbers over. So those of you listening via audio, I will do my best to explain what's on the screen. So the first numbers we've got here is the home league table since Unai Emery arrived at Aston Villa. Villa have picked up 108 points, Jacob, and sit in 4th, having played 51, won 32, drawn 12, and lost 7. Above them is Arsenal in 3rd with 113. Second, Manchester City with 120. And Liverpool at top, having only lost 2 games with 124. In fairness, you think about how good Newcastle are at home as well. I always think of Newcastle has been really strong under Eddie Howe at home. They're actually 5th behind Villa, 6 points off. with 102. So just looking at that record since Emery's arrived at the club, and you bear in mind as well that the first kind of half a season was transitional in many ways. Villa actually lost 3 home games that season, I believe. I think it was Liverpool, Leicester, and Arsenal. So you take that away, and I bring up the second league table here. If you look at Emery's full seasons, Villa have only lost 4 home games in the Premier League in Emery's 2 full seasons, which gives them 80 points at home. Arsenal above them with 86, Man City second with 89, Liverpool first with 94. Villa's home record is, that's the stuff in which a really good team is built, in my opinion. A really good club is built. It's built on the foundations of how much of a fortress your home ground is. And that's something Villa have done really well under Unai Emery. And I think it's safe to say, kind of 2 3/4 seasons in, that's going to continue to evolve and continue to develop and continue to be a strength.
Yeah, and also it's got the reputation now from opposition players that they know it's going to be a very difficult game, and it might affect their strategy and approach. They know that it's difficult to come here, so they'll probably be a bit more on the back foot, be a little bit less free flowing, freewheeling. And I think for Villa players, they feel a degree of comfort really playing at home. The fans obviously loud, mainly encouraging, and they know that they've got really good memories here. So. I played at Villa Park the other day, and I was
here he is, you guys. Are you going to mention that every podcast now?
No, but I get the feeling because when I turned up, I was a bit like Sergio Busquets in number 6 position.
Okay.
I wasn't really, but you do obviously the fact that the fans are there, you win a lot of games there. You got a good feeling about it because you always talk about these teams that are terrible at home. So like I remember when I was covering Southampton, they won like 2 games all season there, and the players were talking about being scarred every time they step foot in the change room or through a tunnel. And the opposite is true as well, probably when you go to Villa Park. So I can't see home form falling off a cliff by any means. No.
Okay, so let's test Jacob then. So in Emery's 2 full seasons, and you've been covering Villa for those 2 full seasons as well. So this is a fair question. Matches played 38, won 23, drawn 11. So probably a few draws of what's let Villa down, being right at the top of this game. Lost 4. Can you name the 4 teams that Villa have lost to in Emery's 2 full seasons?
Arsenal.
Yep, this season.
Tottenham.
Yep, 4-0, wasn't
it? Manchester United.
Yes, bloody Manchester United 2-1. Might have been January, I want to say, 2024.
Oh.
3-1, I think, was the score.
Oh, Newcastle.
Yeah, Newcastle.
Yeah, Newcastle. Yeah, bad to the bit that day. Yeah.
But it's incredible to think, if you've been covering this team for 2 seasons, I've watched Villa for years and covered them in my own way for however long I have. Villa Park has not always been a fortress. To spend last 4 league games in 2 full seasons, 3 of them came in the same season. That is unbelievable. I find that so impressive.
Yeah, and you think of all the teams that have come there, always a lot of them being in good form, the variety of games they've played in terms of the challenges that Emery's team have had to overcome. The fact that really, like you say, the draws have cost them really in terms of drop points to Bournemouth, etc. But at the same time, it's still being quite picky because the home form has been immaculate, and this is not like a flash in the pan. It's like you say, it's over 2 seasons now, over 2.5 really, and they still keep winning games, and they still keep being, like you say, they're picking up 2.11 points per game. So it shows how well they've done and how well they've done over a long period of time.
Yeah, I'm looking at these teams as well in the top 10, so I'm assuming that they're the 10 of the better teams in the Premier League over the last 2.5 years. So discount Liverpool because I don't think we've beaten them. We've lost once and drawn twice. Man City, beaten them at Villa Park. Arsenal, beaten them at Villa Park. Newcastle, routed them at Villa Park twice. Chelsea, we've beat them. Brighton, absolutely hammered them at Villa Park. Spurs have been beaten in the league this season at Villa Park. Manchester United were beaten in Unai Emery's first game. And Fulham have been dispatched at Villa Park a few times as well. So they've beaten all the big boys except for Liverpool as well, and hopefully we can put that right next season.
Yeah, exactly, absolutely. And it shows that they haven't got, I think away from home and in some of the big games, Wembley, Old Trafford, there's maybe a little bit of an inferiority complex.
Agreed.
But you bring anyone to Villa Park, Bayern Munich, for example, and Villa believe they can win, and that's probably the best spot you can be in.
Okay, that was a great point for reminiscing over some great days at Villa Park. Last point, then, Jacob, that we've come up with is the kind of evolution of certain players, and we've name checked Anana, Marlon, and Matson here, and we've spoke about this on our channel before. The fact that those
Mm,
players very much looking to follow the Yuri Tillemans arc of second full season, really hitting the ground running, really becoming important players. All three of them, to an extent, grew as the season went on. Marlon, we know, didn't get much of a chance, didn't get much football, but Anana and Matson definitely grew towards the end of the season. I'm really excited about those three players. I think they can be massive players for Villa.
yeah, definitely, and shows a few things really. It shows the succession planning, I think, for Villa, and they've done it probably 12 months or 2 years early in terms of bringing those players in, and they'll feature more, I'm sure, next season. And Onana might have featured even more if he had not the injuries. Playing in centre midfield is always difficult. Emery and his coaching staff are very demanding of what they want. And Onana is a tall guy that played in a very different system and style at Everton. They didn't have much of the ball. They would play on transition a lot, where he's being asked to receive the ball with 4 or 5 people around him in tight pockets. And for a guy that's so tall, it's very difficult to do that. Usually the best press resistant midfielders are smaller, more nimble, low centre of gravity. He's a big guy, and Emery's asking to be a 6 and a number 8, and I think he's got everything, and that's why Villa and Emery wanted him, because he can do it. He just needs a bit of patience, and I think he can hit the ground running next season. Same with Matson. I think Matson's got a few things to improve on, but he's built up a lot of experience now, and was one of Villa's best players towards the end of the season, bar Old Trafford debacle.
Bar that strange header from the halfway line when he tried to pass back to the goalkeeper.
Yeah, it had no power. And
Honestly.
Marlon, I'm hopefully doing a piece on him in the next few weeks, and I know for a fact that he's using the Tillemans blueprint really, and to offer an optimism and confidence that he can really break in next year. Tillemans didn't start a game till November after he joined, league game that is. And he was in the team for a lot of that season, and then found rhythm, found confidence, and has never looked back. So I think Marlon's looking at that now as he gets settled in properly to live in the Midlands, and these three players can offer a lot. What I will say is I think Matson and Onana were signed to be first team players. I think Marlon probably is more of a squad player to be signed, just purely through the finances involved. But there's no reason why Marlon can't just come in and make a case for himself if he starts the season well.
I actually thought he was Villa's man of the match against Manchester United on Sunday.
Hey,
And like I say,
Marlon,
yeah, probably. He's probably our best player. He looked quite lively when he came on. I
yeah,
certainly wouldn't be dishing that award out to anyone else. So I thought Marlon was really lively. And as I've said many times on the channel, every cameo he's made, he's shown me something, and I've thought you're going to be a really good player, and I really, really like you. So good luck to him for next season, because I really think he's going to do something good for the club, and I'm excited to see him. But my type of footballer, just love the way he plays the game, head down, bouldering through people. That's all for me. I absolutely love that. So, Jacob, that concludes our 5 reasons to be cheerful and positive ahead of next season. How was that for you?
good. I think it's quite cathartic. I know there's been a bit of understandable negativity this season, and PSR just assumes like everyone's being up for sale. I know. I thought
Can we
I'd say
finish there? You think
we
you can
finished
say it
it.
now? Okay.
Yeah, and everyone's up for sale. That's not the case. It's just there'll be some that will have to go through gritted teeth. But Villa are in a brilliant position on the field. They're still very stable on the field, and they've got a lot to look forward to on the field.
Yeah, well, we did well because we were walking a yellow card tightrope for the second part of that show as well, after both tripping up. So that was good that we got through that without getting sent off. So, Jacob, all that's left to do is for me to say thank you for joining me today. If you're listening via Apple Podcasts, then please leave us a lovely review. We've had some great ones recently. Please keep that up. That's really, really great to see. And a 5-star rating on there would be much beneficial to the channel as well. On Spotify, 5 stars on this episode if you've enjoyed it, and leave us a comment as well with your thoughts on this episode. Numbers overall at the moment are really, really strong. We're getting between 12 and 15,000, I think, across like every episode at the moment. So that's really good. Obviously, we're pumping out more content as well. Let us know if there's anything you'd like to see us discuss, or anything you'd like to see on the channel. Content's going to continue, so don't worry about that. Hopefully, you're all enjoying the kind of more volume of content that we're giving you at the moment. Have a great weekend. I'm sure there'll be something on the channel on Saturday or Sunday. All that's left to say now is up the Villa and enjoy your weekend.